Using IFC for bridges today. Before we get started, I want to make sure everyone has been directed toward this little code here. This is the code you need to use the app to make sure you're getting your continuing education credits. So please do that at some point during this session. To introduce here, we have Alan Melly and Joe Renner. Alan Melly graduated from the University of Pittsburgh with a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering. He is a registered professional engineer in Pennsylvania. He has been with the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation for over 23 years. He currently holds the title of Chief of the Digital Delivery Section. His section is responsible for the development and implementation of PennDOT's Digital Delivery Directive 2025 initiative. Joe has worked as a bridge engineer for over 15 years on a wide range of projects in many states and has worked extensively with 3D bridge models. Joe is currently supporting the design and construction of Michigan DOT's first bridge pilot project for digital delivery and the PennDOT Open Bridge Development for the Digital Delivery 2025 initiative. Joe has also been active in national research to move this initiative forward as part of the team delivering FHWA BIM for Bridges projects and currently delivering the Astro Pool Fund on BIM for Infrastructure TPF 548. Please give a welcoming round of applause.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to be talking about IFC and specifically how we're using that in bridges today. I gave a similar presentation on this in the Building Smart Seniors Believing workshop about a month ago. So if you happen to be at that workshop or caught that presentation and you're expecting something that's wildly different, you may be a little disappointed. But don't go, if that is you, don't go leave just yet and go to some of the other amazing presentations that are out there at IHEEP. Because I did, after that presentation, went back and looked at what else can we add to this. And I think what was missing before is looking at different perspectives. Okay? So I asked Alan Melly from PennDOT to come today and just give, from an owner's perspective, what is this IFC and open BIM? What that does, what that looks like as part of their vision, how, what importance that is to them as they move forward with digital delivery BIM. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Alan to kick us off.
All right, thanks, Joe. Again, my name is Alan Melly, Chief of the Digital Delivery Section. So, in our move towards digital delivery, in 2019, we set that vision that by 2025, our construction projects will be bid using 3D technology and no longer be, in that traditional construction plan format. So what that means is everything's going to be contained within that CAD model. So your traffic control plan, E&S plan, and so forth will all be contained in that CAD model. But as we deliver those projects right now, they are delivered in a proprietary file format. That is the Bentley DGN files. But moving forward, our goal is to be as agnostic as possible. We want to make sure that our consultants and our contractors can use whatever software platform they so choose, as long as it meets that criteria that we have set out So as we move forward, so our extended vision, we're coming up on 2025. So, you know, as we go beyond 2025, it's really our extended version, really as soon as we can. Let's look at, you know, providing these bid documents in an agnostic format. So it is very important to the department that this is what we actually went after for our ADCMS grant. We were going after the, you know, the IFC and IFC deliverables. That's how important it is to the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation that we have that open data standard. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe to get into more specifics.
Thanks, Al. So again, wanted to make sure we brought that perspective in, and it's just not from the designer's perspective here, okay? So what we're going to talk about here today, I'm going to put my practitioner hat on here and really get into what we've done specifically for IFC bridges. And what we're talking about here is those typical workhorse type bridges, right? You know, not necessarily our cable stay, those signature type projects. Some of those, I think some of those projects are so large, they kind of come up with create their own ecosystem almost, and it really is not indicative of what DOTs see in their day in and day out. Okay, so I think that's important to note that here we're talking about these typical bridge structures. All right. So we're going to be looking at specifically the model as a legal document, some of the pilot projects that Michael Baker's been involved in from around the country, and how again where we are with that. So again, the three questions we're going to answer here is where are we? Okay. So looking at specifically the construction. By the time we get to construction of some of these pilot projects, we're maybe 2 or 3 versions behind on our software. So you know, we're talking here, and what the examples we're going to provide are looking at IFC 2.3, for example, if you're familiar with that. So you know, we're going to look at what we're doing with that now, and able to still do that maybe in that state. Where do we want to be? So where do we want to be in the near future with this, with some of the work we've been going on with for bridges and for infrastructure fund. And then finally, I want to talk about why is this important? Why are we talking about this? And leave you with an image that's hopefully gets your attention, maybe even scares you. I don't want to go to that first too. So who has heard of IFC? Hands up, do some audience participation. Okay. All right, keep your hands up. This is audience participation. Who knows what IFC stands for? Okay, I'm going to call on you. So that's good. I just wanted to get an idea here of the audience. Okay, so I'm going to try to give you the 2-minute Cliff Notes version, so we're all on the same page here. Okay, so IFC does stand for Industry Foundation Classes. It is an open, neutral file format that's standardized. It's being maintained by Building Smart. It's been used in the vertical industry for decades. Okay, as kind of that file exchange format, integration format, and now has gained a lot of interest and momentum from horizontal infrastructure, not only in the U.S. with some of the Astro adoption, but also internationally. So this is an international standard here. It's also digital ready, which again in the vertical industry they've used this for BIM models as the exchange standard for decades. Okay? So again, probably less than 2 minutes, real quick. That's what we're talking about. So, all right. So where are we? Go through some past and current examples of where we've used IFC again in these model as a legal document projects. So the first example we have is reinforcement, and more specifically, reinforcement fabrication. Okay. So one of the first mold pilot projects in the country, the fabricator really couldn't use that native file format that was being delivered as the contractual document, right? So we looked at other ways, or it was looked at other ways that we can provide that information. IFC was one that they could take and bring into their systems so that they could start their process if they need. Okay. Anybody, reinforcement is a good place to start with this. Anybody want to venture a guess of why reinforcement would be a good kind of element or area to start when we start talking about IFC? Yeah, cool.
It's already been defined by vertical.
Vertical, right? Yep. Reinforcement is reinforcement, right? Yep, very good. Exactly. All right. So you know, they were able to, with that, be able to put out the information in their drawings for their placement, rebar placement, their steel workers here, as well as do what they need internally with this. And I think it's important to note at this point that there are going to be groups that are further along in this than others, and we have to make sure that we are taking them into consideration as we move forward. So again, the ironworkers out there, I mean, I think we've all seen some of the PR glasses, the people looking around the building that hasn't been built yet. But then you look at the ironworkers that are out there in the field, and it's a very different reality. Okay, so we have to make sure that we can accommodate this, and again, with the fabricator creating these drawings that they would need out in the field, but they're able to do that from that digital information, that IFC file. So now a couple other examples here. I'm going to go into, and this just as a standard here, we got the format's going to be what the image on the left is kind of that native import into a software, okay? And on the right-hand side is going to be what that IFC import is, okay? So in this particular case, this is this is from an external design review, and here we're looking specifically at the bearing pads. So it might be a little bit difficult for you to see here, but what we're pointing out here in the native format, you can see the geometry. There's some weird geometry stuff going on. It looks like some of the pad shapes are not being translated correctly geometrically, right? And then here's the obvious one. There's nothing here, right? We're missing some information. So there's a translation issue. All right, and what we did, you know, we went to the vendor, and by the way, I specifically left off vendor or anything that hopefully you can identify vendors from, because again, we're really looking at the process. There are examples here from probably the top 3 software vendors here, so it's not a specific vendor problem, it's an industry issue. So I just want to make sure I mention that here. But in this particular case, we were looking at, we were looking at how we can do this. We went to the vendor, explained the issue, and they said, yeah, it's a bug. We'll get you on the next release, right? But we have to deliver these projects tomorrow. So, and again, it's not a knock on vendors, that's their process, but we have to figure out how to deliver these projects. So the answer we came up with here was to try IFC import for the same information, okay? And you can see here that the geometry on the bearing pads came through 100% here. The translation issue with not being able to come through came through, correct. And we were able to get that information for that design review that had a deadline to make sure it got out the door. Next, this is a reinforcement from the same project. Okay, so the native import here, we have reinforcement. You can kind of see, hopefully you can see outside of the footing in this case, this abutment footing, some sticking out, embedments here that should not be. Okay, and again, what we're looking at here is, IFC import being able to get that geometry and our reinforcement completely correct with, again, that IFC import. Again, with specifically reinforcements, another one, because that's been involved in this for years. Next one, this is the really scary one. So what you're looking at here on the left-hand side is a plan view of a footing, abutment and wing footing, which is supposed to be a combined footing, but you can kind of see there's 2 separate footings there. And this one happened, it's actually a screenshot from somebody's phone, or from the surveyor's phone. I was talking to the surveyor, he was going to stake this footing out the next day, and he called me and said, I don't know what's going on here, I'm seeing, 2 separate footings, and some of the piles are outside of they're not encased in concrete. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is a combined footing. And then finally he stops and said, hey, hold on a second. Took a screenshot from his phone of his screen, sent it to me in a text message, and this is what I saw. Okay? Not even, geometrically completely off. And I said, oh, okay, now I get it, right? So obviously, something's off here in our answer, because again, he was going out the next day to stake this out. All right, so what do we have here? We had IFC exports, files that they deployed, and that came in completely geometrically correct. Now you're looking here in that same software, our combined footing, what it should look like and how it's designed. So now, kind of shifting gears here, that's some examples of where we are. Where do we want to be? All right. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. This is covered in the general sessions with what's going on with the pooled funds here. And I just want to make sure I'm stressing this here. It's really, really important to have these element property sets here, specifically for our structural or civil elements. Okay. You know, right now we're struggling because we essentially have to. We're not getting our properties to come across, you know, within the IFC file exactly how we want to see them with our elements. All right, it's coming across as, you know, IFC building element proxy type or something similar, generic types, right? So, you know, essentially what we're having to do is to maintain those attributes and property types. We're having to kind of control and have two sets of models, if you will, right? Which is terrible practice. We all know that's not good to maintain. Okay, but again, we have to deliver tomorrow. We're finding ways to, you know, make this happen. Okay. Another one. This is an important aspect. I haven't seen this talked about a whole lot within the industry, but I think it's something to be considered here as we move forward, and that's being able to share views, all right, and other content through an IFC export. Okay, so one of the things that we found, if you were in last presentation we did with ID types, looking at, you know, the importance of being able to have saved views and share this information, right? You know, this is something that I think is feasible with everything that we have, and it's been very beneficial to those out in the field having to use this and build from this, who aren't used to CAD, right? So the ability to kind of store those views, be able to extend them and use IFC to help transfer that from software to software is something, again, that's, especially in this transition period where we're, you know, hybrid and people are just getting into this, I think is something else to consider and maybe more something to put on the radar. So finally, you know, why are we important? Why is this important? And I think the best thing I could do is just leave you with this slide. I know it scares me. This is something that, you know, had my seal, my signature on, and the fact that this is how it translated from, you know, reputable software from one to the other. I've lost sleep. Okay. I think it just again underscores the importance of being able to do this. And again, software vendors, you know, they're in it to make money. There is a business, right? The use case and the return on investment of doing 50 translations from different software just isn't. That's not feasible, right? So the stress the importance of having IFCs with one schema, one standard that they can map to, and then other software can map to that same schema, I think is extremely important. Okay, because this obviously, and luckily this was big enough that the surveyor called me and said, you know, something's going on here. But what if the difference was small, right? And it didn't catch it, wasn't so obvious. And that's what kind of scares me, and I'll leave you with that. So, I think we have some time for questions.
We sure do.
Okay.
Have you used IFC to deal with manufacturers, being designed and prefab job site? Are they accepted?
Yeah, so that, a lot of what we've seen so far again in these pilot projects is they've been able to at least bring that into their software. It's not another one where they can take and use it. They need to build on top of that, right, with what their processes are, their fabrication processes are. But we have been able, with IFC, we've been able to at least bring that information.
So the core data transfers.
Right. Now, and again, what I think is being done in some of these other areas is looking at extending that so that we get more of the information instead of these proxy elements. We get actual attributes and everything that's defined that we can hopefully they bring in and they can use more of that in the future.
Attributions is carrying forward the process you have now?
Not in the way that we want to see it, at least in the same structure that we have before, at least in the test that we have. Not that we couldn't force that to do it, but again, we don't know what software somebody, you know, fabricated and everything they're going to be using, right? Good question. Yeah. So what we've really kind of backed down to 2.3 because that was what came from geometry, and that's what the software vendors right now are supporting. So we'd love to use that, 4.3 and everything when it comes out. But for these examples, that was 2.3. Yeah, good question. Yeah.
How do you get vendors to support this when vendor lock is a business model for them?
It's a good question. Yeah, that's fair. I don't know that I'm the best person to answer that. I think it's, again, I'll say it from my perspective here. Where the industry's going and where I think what needs to happen is there's no best software to do everything, right? And contractors, understanding that the contractor's probably not going to be using MicroStation out in the field, for example, or Autodesk EE, okay? So again, I'm trying not to single out vendors here in my presentation. But I think what I see is that the stress the importance, you heard Alan's, how that's important to these owners. To me, the first, I've said this before, but the first vendor that's be able to show that they can implement this consistently in a way that's usable for designers, for owners, I think wins. So I'll leave it at that, but from my perspective, that's what I'll say. Yeah. Hey, Ken.
I'm Calvin Catlin, maybe I can try to respond to some of those questions. I'm with Building Smart USA, and we also contribute to Building Smart International. So indeed, I think lots of major vendors are supporting what industry foundation classes and Building Smart is about. They are putting resource, they are putting their technical team, they also have a good long track record of supporting it. To give you some examples, I think all the
5 minutes now? Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Just a basic question, not terribly familiar with IFC, but what you just described, what you showed is a designer working in X software, they get to a certain point, and they need to deliver it to somebody else, and do they export, is it a file export, or is it a design export?
Yeah, it's a file export. So this is the data exchange, if you will. So I don't see us, the native file format ever being like an IFC that you use. This is going to be the exchange format that puts out.
But whatever that software that the designer's working in, theoretically it has or it should have an export to IFC.
Correct. Yeah.
As well as an import.
Yeah. Export.
And then one note is the actual IFC file is human readable, so you're not worried about binary changes going down. You can open it up in text editor now, and probably from 100 years from now.
Yeah, that's another big benefit of having IFCs. That's one of the biggest things for learners too, is how am I going to open this file? They have files from other vendors that are a couple years old that are corrupt and can't open. So this is, again, human readable, something that's going to be updated and be able to be accessible years down the road.
There are APIs out there today, building smart, that allow you to read the IFC consumer. So vendors are starting from scratch. The foundation is there.
No, good point.
IFC toolkit. Look it up.
Sorry, just a follow-up question. So on the, you showed the picture of the native import and then the IFC import. So in that scenario, you're at, whatever the recipient software is. And so it must have been able to take the native file.
Right. Yeah,
But then it was able to take an IFC and then you compare the different.
right. And probably the native, it's an import might not be the right word because it's really, it was able to open that file format within this other software. So that's probably a misnomer. But yeah, that was something that was directly brought in through that. In these examples at least. Anything else? Well, thank you. Seriously, it was really engaging. Thank you for being so engaged.